Another expression. I think you're still on the
We go live now to the U.S. Senate, where work resumes on the Farm Bill. That measure sets policies over 5 years for farmer subsidies, crop insurance, and nutrition programs. And we expect work to continue throughout this week. It's also possible that Majority Leader Reid could file cloture on the nomination of Richard Cordray to be the permanent head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, with Republicans saying they'll oppose that nomination. Live now to the floor of the U.S. Senate, here on C-SPAN 2.
Dr. Barry Black will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Our Father, we honor your wonderful name. The angels bow before you. Heaven and earth adore you. Your voice echoes over the oceans and thunders above the roar of the raging sea. We pray today, O God, for the families of the dozens killed in the massive tornado in Oklahoma. Bring healing to the injured and comfort to those who mourn. Today, may our senators honor you with worthy service. By their words and actions, empower them to glorify your name. Lord, guide them with your loving providence as they trust in your wisdom and might. May they commit themselves to your will and leave the results to you. We pray in your merciful name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., May 21st, 2013. To the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable William M. Cowan, a Senator from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to perform the duties of the Chair. Signed, Patrick J. Leahy, President Pro Tempore.
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
Yesterday afternoon I called home to check, see how things were going, to visit with my wife a little bit. And she said, you can't imagine what I'm watching on TV. She said, it's hard to watch. She was talking about the terrible storm that had hit Oklahoma. The devastation, the deaths, and the injuries she tried to explain to me was hard to relate, even though she was watching it on TV. Homes destroyed, schools destroyed, even elementary schools destroyed. I think what Landra did is describe how all America feels and felt upon watching it. Our hearts go out to the families whose loved ones were lost. The extent of that, we don't know. We're still waiting. Those injured or missing in the devastating tornadoes in Oklahoma, we feel so sad for them. Our thoughts are with those who were affected by this tragedy, and so many people have been affected. Families still searching for their family members, their children. I recognize and commend the heroic efforts of the first responders who rushed to the scene and have been working tirelessly to help those who were injured. They worked all night. And they, of course, they're still searching for the missing. The efforts of neighbors, citizens, everyday citizens, young and old, who've been heroic in helping. While we may not know the extent of the damage now, we will continue to do everything in our power to help the people of Oklahoma as we recover from these terrible tornadoes, these acts of nature. And we'll stand vigilant today and tomorrow, ready to help as more storms threaten the region. Every resource will be made available. Every federal resource will be made available to help the communities affected by this tragedy. I look forward to hearing the President. His speech will start momentarily on the disaster. I'm pleased that FEMA Administrator Craig Fugate is already in Oklahoma assessing the extent of the damage and deciding how the federal government can best assist. I'll continue to monitor the search and rescue efforts. Whenever tragedy strikes any part of our nation, it really strikes us all. So I pledge the people of Oklahoma my continued support, our continued support, as they begin to recover from this awful storm. Mr. President, following leader remarks today, the Senate will be in a period of morning business for an hour. The majority will control the first half, Republicans the final half. Following that morning business, the Senate will resume consideration of S. 954, the Farm Bill. I spoke to Chairman Stabenow last night. She indicated that she believes that there's an opportunity to finish the bill even this week. I certainly hope that's the case. The Senate will recess from 12:30 to 2:15 today to allow for our weekly caucus meetings.
Mr. President, the Republican leader. We're all thinking today about the tragic loss of life out in Oklahoma yesterday. So this morning I'd like to take just a moment to express my condolence to all who've lost family and friends in this horrible disaster. It's been a truly heartbreaking loss of life, dozens injured and killed yesterday, including many children. The tornado that tore through Moore, flattened entire neighborhoods and destroyed at least 2 elementary schools, Briarwood and Plaza Towers, just as students were about to be released for their last week of school before the summer recess. I don't think any of us can comprehend the searing grief of their parents. I'm told that 2 crews from the Louisville Red Cross recently left for Oklahoma to help those who are now suffering. Kentuckians understand the terrible toll these types of storms can take. Just last March, I toured the wreckage of a deadly tornado in West Liberty, Kentucky, where churches, homes, businesses, and schools were reduced to rubble and where several Kentuckians lost their lives. I remember full well the tornado that went through my hometown of Louisville back in the 70s, knocked down every house on the street of my parents. My mother was in the basement, and mercifully, it skipped over our house for some reason, but leveled all the houses across the street and the ones next door. So it's really hard to accurately describe the devastation a storm like this leaves in its wake. And as first responders continue to dig through the rubble in Moore, I fear we'll hear a lot more bad news in the days ahead. That said, I'm sure we'll also hear stories of hope and self-sacrifice, as we almost always do when tragedies like this strike, of strangers shielding strangers, of neighbors helping others rebuild, of volunteers working through the night to sift through the debris to find survivors. As we've seen time and time again in recent years, Americans are at their best when called upon to help each other in tragic circumstances. And this circumstance could hardly be more tragic. So we in the Senate offer our heartfelt prayers to those affected by this terrible storm. We offer our gratitude to the first responders, and we offer our encouragement to Governor Fallin and the many federal, state, and local officials who are working hard to assist in the recovery and who will aid in the rebuilding of homes and schools and families and lives. Now, on a different matter, Mr. President, later this morning, the Majority Leader and I will welcome the President of Burma, Tonsein. He will be here to discuss political reform in that country and our bilateral relationship. And later today, I'll have more to say about the reform movement in Burma. I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business for 1 hour, with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the majority controlling the first half.
Yes.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
The Senate is continuing work today on a 5-year farm bill. The measure sets policies for crop insurance, nutrition programs, and farmer subsidies. Lawmakers may consider amendments today that would extend current rates on federal student loans. And now in its 5th day, the Senate Judiciary Committee continues its work on the immigration bill created by the so-called Gang of 8 bipartisan senators. Chairman Leahy has said he hopes to complete work on the bill by the end of the week. While we wait for a senator to speak, we'll show you some of that markup now just about getting underway.
cover you, don't worry. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we can start. I'm not going to do an opening statement. I think Senator Grassley may have. Senator Grassley has a question. Go ahead. I'll yield to Senator Grassley.
If Senator Durbin or Senator from New York here, I have several questions, but I'm only going to ask one in regard to health care and this title. There's a lot of discussion about how the bill would incentivize employers to hire newly legalized persons rather than Americans in order to avoid the employer mandate under the health care law. I think the bill rightly prohibits legalized individuals from accessing health credits to buy health insurance. But along with this comes the notion that employers would be able to skirt the penalties if they don't cover these people on their health insurance. One of the sponsors of the bill said that the issue is being discussed among the group of 8. I'd like to know what the discussions are taking place on this point. How will the bill, two questions. How will the bill ensure that those who are legalized don't get public benefits, but at the same time don't disincentivize employers to displace or give secondary preference to Americans? And what changes is the group of 8 contemplating on this matter?
Senator Grassley, under the Health Care Reform Act, the creation of the insurance exchanges, and an effort to bring more people into insured coverage, that clearly was our goal and those of us who voted for it. Under this bill, and I'm just checking with the staff, there is an ambiguity, and you've identified it. These RPI workers will not be entitled to the subsidy under the Health Care Reform Act, so they are not getting a special helping hand for health insurance. It's my understanding they can purchase it without subsidy. That is their right. You've asked the right question, though. So what impact does that have on their employer? If the employer were dealing with just employees coming in, there are certain standards about health insurance that's offered to the employees, how many have to be covered, whether they're full-time or part-time, and so forth, and a penalty if the employer fails to meet the requirements of the Health Care Reform Act. I've asked the staff and I've said, is this something we could even resolve in this legislation? And she believes that it really is a matter that has to be discussed in the context of the Health Care Reform Act as to what the ultimate impact will be. So I will concede that this is an issue which is not totally resolved at this moment as we meet. That is my impression. I defer to Senator Schumer or others who might have something to add to this.
And when you say it's unresolved at this point and an ambiguity, is it something, did your answer say that you're continuing to work on this and intend to do something on it before the bill gets through the Senate, or is it that it can't even be handled in this context?
No, I believe it can. I may be wrong, but it is a Finance Committee jurisdiction issue, and so it wouldn't be within the Judiciary Committee.
Okay. Thank you. And that's the only question. Do you want me to take up my amendment?
I think you're going to go to finance first, and we can...
Senator, number 17?
No, I guess Lee's ahead of me. Lee has... No, Lee's...
No, you're for...
You have to go to finance.
Right now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We were going to take up the Grassley 17, but he has to go to finance. He and I discussed this last night, and we decided we'll just keep going because there is a possibility that we can get done today, which I know I see a big smile on Senator Flake's face and a few others, and we can. So what I'm going to do, Senator Feinstein wants to do a couple more things on her, so we're going to go to Senator Blumenthal with number 15, I believe. Is that correct, Senator Blumenthal? Then you have the floor, and then we'll go to Senator Hatch is here. We'll go to him. Otherwise, Senator Sessions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A number of the amendments that I've offered so far have to do with the process, in fact, with due process. Most recently, the last amendment having to do with raids and the requirement that law enforcement activities by the ICE and CPB be done with approval from supervisors or under exigent circumstances. The amendment that I'm offering, and I'm not going to ask a vote on it, Blumenthal 15, has to do much more with the policy and the cutoff date that is being applied as a result of the difficult compromise that was reached by the Group of 8. And I, again, want to express my thanks to senators from both sides of the aisle that have participated in this very excruciatingly demanding and challenging task of forging a consensus. One element of that consensus has to do with the presence requirement in S-744, which is now in the bill at December 31, 2011. Blumenthal 15 would move that date to April 15, 2013, which is the date that this measure was filed. That is the date that expressed to the world what the requirements were, the criteria, the standards that would be applied for the path to earn citizenship. That's the date that gave people, in effect, notice what the requirements for citizenship would be. The date now in the bill, December 31, 2011, is in essence an arbitrary cutoff. Of course, we all know that laws frequently contain arbitrary cutoffs. They may seem arbitrary, but there's a need for a cutoff. And I respect that the framers of this compromise had that obligation to adopt a cutoff date. But the effect is that 400,000 people will be barred from walking that path to earn citizenship simply because they came sometime between December 31 of 2011 and April 17, 2013. Those 400,000 or so people, it's an estimate, regardless of the specific number, we know it's in the hundreds of thousands, will in effect be in the same status, in the shadows, of the people whom we are now trying to provide that historic opportunity for earned citizenship. I raise Blumenthal 15 because I hope that at some point as we move forward with these deliberations, some consideration will be given to shifting the date, the cutoff date, to April 17, 2013, or some point that is fairer, juster, and more expressive and faithful to the goals and ideals that this historic measure has. We must expand the number of people eligible for that path to citizenship, and unfortunately the current cutoff date will leave us with families as well as individuals, hundreds of thousands of those people in the same moral and practical situation that has brought us to this point. And so I offer and I withdraw this amendment, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for this opportunity to speak to this issue.
No, I appreciate what the senator from Connecticut is saying, and we all know there has to be a cutoff date somewhere. I expect that each one of us could probably come up with differing cutoff dates, and this one was the one agreed to. So I must admit my feeling is the idea of getting as many people out of the shadows as possible, which is for the attitude this senator takes, that I find a great deal that I like about your amendment. I understand, though, the reasons why you've withdrawn it, and I appreciate that, but I am glad you've raised it. And I think it's a matter that should continue to be in the discussions as this bill goes forward. And
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
thank you. If Senator, normally go Grassley, Hatch, or Sessions, but Senator Sessions, I understand why Senator Grassley and Senator Hatch are not here. Let me go to you on, I believe you have number 30, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. The senator from Alabama is recognized.
Colleagues, we had a vote earlier about the earned income tax credit. It was a close vote, but it allowed continued, it appears to me, clearly allows the earned income tax credit checks from the government for low-income Americans or qualifiers to continue at an average of about $2,000 per year. Our colleagues who sponsored the legislation have said there would be no welfare-type assistance, and earned income tax credit is not a tax deduction but an actual tax payment. This is different. It does not apply to any of the people that would be here and be legalized under the proposal that we have before us, but would apply only in the future to persons not legalized who would come to the country illegally, and it deals with a clear problem that I believe we should fix. It would deal with the situation in which individuals here illegally utilize the I-10 accounting procedure or tax procedure in lieu of a Social Security number and have been able to claim child tax credits. Secretary Geithner's Inspector General said this recently. Millions of people are seeking this tax credit who we believe are not entitled to it. We've made recommendations to the IRS as to how they could address this, and they have not taken sufficient action, in our view, to solve the problem. So this is a problem that's internally raised by the U.S. Treasury Department. It's been discussed with IRS. Apparently, they think that the current law does not allow them to block and insist on an I-10, a Social Security number instead of the I-10. The I-10 is created for people like foreign investors who will owe tax in the United States, but and to file taxes, but are not don't have Social Security numbers. According to the Inspector General in 2008, 87% of the I-10 documents, the individual tax identification number applications, contained errors and were accompanied by fraudulent documents, and more than 55,000, quote, were used multiple times on approximately 102,000 tax returns with refunds totaling more than $202 million. Despite this evidence of massive fraud, the IRS has failed to alter their policy as suggested by their own Inspector General. In a recent press report, one illegal alien admitted that his address was used to file tax returns by 4 other undocumented workers who don't live there. Those 4 workers claimed 20 children who lived outside the United States. They claimed 20 children lived in that residence, and as a result, the IRS sent the illegal immigrants tax returns totaling $29,608. None of those children had ever visited in the United States or had let alone lived here. When asked why undocumented workers should receive tax credits for children living in a foreign country, the illegal alien stated, if the opportunity is there and they can give it to me, why not take advantage of it? Close quote. I suppose that's a rational thought. It's up to us to follow the Inspector General's suggestions on how to fix this. The payment of federal funds through this tax benefit appears to provide an additional incentive. This is a quote from the Inspector General of Treasury Department. The payment of federal funds through this tax benefit appears to provide an additional incentive for aliens to enter, reside, and work in the United States without authorization, which contradicts federal law and policy to remove such incentives. In other words, we're incentivizing people who've come illegally by giving them direct checks from the government through the child tax credit. It's not a tax deduction, but a direct check, and most of the people who are here are not paying income tax. The Treasury Inspector General said Congress should fix this and change the law. I proposed it previously. It's estimated that it would save $7.6 billion, a big problem out there. So this, again, will not apply to those who would be in the 11 million or others. It would apply only in the future. It's a situation we raised earlier and on the floor of the Senate. It has not moved forward. The House has passed some legislation like this. I believe it's the proper approach to end the abuse of the child tax credit. Illegal aliens should not be able to get it, and they certainly shouldn't get it for children that don't even live in the United States or may not exist at all, for that matter.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Illinois.
Mr. Chairman, the senator from Alabama, at the close of his statement, made a very important point. This debate does not apply to the 11 million who would be seeking this probationary status, provisional status. They will be receiving Social Security numbers. And so there's no question that they will go through the same process as the rest of America when it comes to qualifying or not qualifying for the child tax credit. The issue of fraud, though, it is true that those who are operating with the individual, individual taxpayer identification number, as well as people under Social Security, can qualify for the child tax credit. How does a person who has such an ITIN number qualify? In order, they need to submit to the Internal Revenue Service a valid passport, 2 other forms of identification, such as civil birth certificate and current photo ID. All of the children that are claimed under the child tax credit also have to have either a Social Security number or an ITIN before they could qualify for their parents to receive the child tax credit. So the system, when it comes to these people under ITIN, is also a system with verification in it, as our Social Security system is. And if I don't argue with the senator, there is evidence of fraud in both categories, Social Security numbers, ITIN, and we should stop the fraud in those categories, period. But to argue that it's the ITIN holders, those who don't have Social Security numbers, who are the source of the fraud, I don't think he has the evidence to show that. Here, let me finish if I can, and then I'll be happy to answer your question. Here is the bottom line question we need to ask when it comes to this policy. First, do we want fraud in this program? Of course not. Second, do we want more children living in poverty in the United States of America? Of course not. The child tax credit says if you are a low-income family, we will help you take care of your children. We will give you a stipend, a tax credit to take care of your children, so that instead of leaving the child with the next-door neighbor who may or may not be the best place, they might be able to find a place that is wholesome and safe and healthy for that little boy or little girl. That is a good thing for our country, and it's a good public policy goal. Let's address fraud, and I think the Finance Committee should. But this bill doesn't deal with the fraud in this program. It deals with the immigration question, which the senator from Alabama conceded is not touched by this amendment.
Senator Durbin, it happens differently from that. What's happening is persons file under a false Social Security name illegally here, and the IRS assigns them an I-10 and processes the return. And that's really the core of the Inspector General's concern about it. And it is plainly a policy that's allowing illegal aliens in our country to get federal government checks, $1,000 per child, and as a result of that, violating the law. Now, the first thing I would suggest to my colleagues, look, we want to help people who have children in America, and we have the child tax credit, which I've always supported. But surely we can agree that if somebody, after this bill passes, after this amnesty occurs, and they're given a legal status, all those individuals are given a legal status, we shouldn't continue the policy of sending government benefits to people who in the future enter illegally. I really believe this is a fundamental question of will to deal with illegality, and the first thing you do is not benefit financially people who come illegally.
You know, we have so many times in governmental action, the steps are taken that harm children, and I'm not about to vote for something which I think would harm children. Let's think about. Well, let me finish. This would deny the child tax credit to numerous U.S. citizen children, and not just immigrants who are present illegally. If you have people pay their taxes using individual taxpayer identification number, they pay payroll taxes, as well as Social Security and Medicare taxes, even though they don't receive the benefits of Social Security and Medicare. And it seems like what this amendment does, no matter how well-intentioned, we're all against the idea of fraud. But this simply seems like an additional punitive measure that's going to end up harming a large number of low-wage worker families and their children. You know, there seems to be kind of an attitude here that, gee, if somebody comes here as an immigrant, they must be trying to game the system. And I totally reject that. I know so many extraordinarily hard-working people in my little state of Vermont, people I see in the grocery store when I'm there, people I see at church on Sunday, people I see when I'm walking down the street of my hometown. These are hard-working, law-abiding people. They make Vermont a better state. And I am just not going to vote for things that say somehow give the implication that we feel that they're here just because they want to break the law. I know so many that are as law-abiding as anybody else in our state, and I will oppose this amendment. Do you like a roll call?
Mr. Chairman, could I wrap up before we...
Oh, I thought you were finished.
I appreciate the Chairman's concern for children, but I want to emphasize that this amendment would prohibit the plain rewarding of individuals who've entered the country illegally with government benefits. So a vote, what I understand you to be saying is, Mr. Chairman, that you're prepared, if a person comes here illegally and has or claims to have children here, that they should get this benefit. Surely we can agree we're not going to do that. If we don't do that, if we can't agree on that, how can we ever ask the people to believe that we're willing to create a lawful system in the future?
Would the Senator yield for a question?
The Inspector General of Treasury Department said this is a problem and needs to be fixed.
Would the Senator yield for a question?
Yes.
Would the Senator concede that there are three different categories of workers we're talking about? Those who are here legally with a Social Security number, those who are here and have declared themselves so that they have an I-10 number who pay taxes, and those who are working perhaps with false identification and someone else's Social Security number. It seems to me that you've targeted the second category, which is paying taxes, has a legal presence in the United States, at least through this number, and say that they are the problem. It strikes me it's the third category that you should be focused on.
Well, there are very few people that meet the original intention of the I-10. It's a ability of really investors who come to America. That's who's supposed to be using it. Fundamentally, the Treasury Department, getting false Social Security numbers, have decided to assign them an I-10 because they can't process the matter if they're under the Social Security number that's false. So they've created this mechanism that the Inspector General says is wrong and ought to be fixed. They think they're required to do something like this and are waiting on Congress to act. I really am amazed that we can't reach an agreement on this. Hopefully we can. Mr. Chairman, I would ask for a roll call.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator, before you call the roll, you wanted to say something?
Mr. Chairman, very briefly, the premise of this amendment appears to be that of the millions of filers for this credit on behalf of mainly U.S.-born citizens are committing massive fraud. That is not the case. We should focus as a laser beam on those who are fraudulently claiming these credits, but we know that this is a very important credit for people who are making generally under $21,000 a year. Every penny counts for them. They are not getting rich off claiming this tax credit. All of their money goes to paying for food, rent, taking care of their children, and that is what this is about. The massive fraud that is going on, there is no such thing, but we should, of course, go after the fraud that is occurring. So I urge my colleagues to vote against this amendment.
Clerk will call the roll.
No.
No by proxy. No by proxy. No by proxy.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Sessions.
Aye.
Mr. Brand.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Cornyn.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Lee.
Aye.
Mr. Cruz.
Aye.
Mr. Blake.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, the votes are 8 days, 10 days.
Thank you. I understand that Senator Rono, you have Amendment 20.
I have Amendment 20.
And
I have a
you also have a second degree.
amendment to clarify some of the text.
Without objection, the second degree is accepted, and the amendment is before us as amended with a second degree. Senator, it's all yours.
This amendment is very simple. It would require DHS to collect demographic data from RPI applicants, such as the country from which they came and an explanation of how they entered the United States. For example, did they overstay their visa or did they enter the country illegally? It seems to me that RPI applications are a potential gold mine of data that will give us a better understanding of the undocumented population, which would inform a whole host of policy decisions in the future. It would be a shame not to collect this data. The data would be provided totally anonymously, and the data would be protected by the same privacy protections that apply to data collections for the census. I urge my colleagues' support of this amendment.
I think this kind of information is important for us to have, especially as in your amendment, you have some very clear privacy protections. All those in favor of the amendment would signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes obviously have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Do you have an amendment? Yeah. Right. Yeah, yours. Senator Grassley.
Now, I know the members of the committee know that there is some judicial review. This is, let me start over again. This is amendment number 17. I know the members of this committee know that there is some judicial review in district court now of people that are in the immigration process. This bill greatly expands it. The expansion is not as significant as what can happen as a result of the expansion, and you can have people forever delaying deportation because of the ability to appeal. So I'll go into some detail now. Example, the new RPI program, any individual applicant that is denied can be reviewed in any district court and circuit court throughout the country. Applicants can challenge anything with respect to their individual application and can appeal their case through the various levels of review at the Department of Homeland Security, the federal court system. The bill also provides a manner for class action lawsuits to be filed by applicants. There's already exists a review process within Homeland Security. This bill codifies that, no problem with that. If an applicant is denied, he has a right to appeal to the Administrative Appeals Unit within the department for a complete new review of application. So there already exists an avenue for immigrants to have initial determination review. 2 levels of review at the department are more than adequate for these kinds of cases. There's no need to have multiple bites at the apple through the adding the federal court. Further, the bill treats these programs as a legal right rather than a discretionary benefit. Just like you have a civil right to come to this country. That was stated by a high administrative official recently. And where is it in the Constitution that any place around the world has a civil right to come to America? It doesn't state that the department has the authority to deny applicant in the exercise of discretion, as is common for many forms of immigration relief. Under this bill, the federal courts could be inundated with petitions for review if the Secretary denied even a small portion of the millions of applicants that will be filed under RPI, agricultural worker, or other visa programs. In fact, now this gets to the cost of the taxpayers. The Judicial Conference of the United States, that's a government organization telling us what impact various pieces of legislation have on court costs. It expresses serious concerns about the increased workload that this bill would create for the federal court system. Their letter stated that the bill, quote, would have serious resource implications for the federal courts, in part because of judicial review provisions. We shouldn't expand the jurisdiction of the federal courts to review potentially all these individual applications without knowing firsthand how this broad expansion of federal court review will impact their caseload. Moreover, according to the bill, an undocumented immigrant who applies under the RPI program cannot be removed from the country or detained so long as he has an application pending with the Department or the federal courts. Thus, such immigrant who has filed a meritless, even a meritless application under the RPI program could hold up his removal for many years, maybe, well, many years, and before the denial of his application is truly final.